jumping
it's
right
gotta
in.
it's gotta be something in my processing. Yeah, it's something. It's got to be something in my processing because I thought it was the internet, and we recently upgraded the internet for the speed, but it's
Mhm.
definitely something with the laptop that I'm working with that I need to go in there and either update, upgrade, or whatever it is that needs to be done. But who's Charlie Kirk?
I don't know. I guess he died.
Keith's just put in there.
Yeah, I don't know. I've
Rest
never
in
heard of
peace,
him.
Charlie Kirk.
I
It's
don't even look at the news very much, honestly. Like if a
yeah.
headline,
Well, I have no idea who that is. I don't know if
yeah,
it's a news anchor or celebrity, or you got to give me some information there, Keith.
I could check my notifications because sometimes things come through and I don't dismiss them.
Yeah, well, it's obviously something that I'm
Shooting.
my circle.
Shooting at Charlie Kirk event in Utah is what I'm seeing.
A video of AI of Charlie getting shot. What? Fingers? I don't know. No idea.
Oh, huh. Okay.
Well, rest in peace.
Yeah. Unfortunate. If real or not, I don't know. Okay, so Nick is saying just dodge this topic. Okay.
Okay. Well, we're not here to talk about this Kirk gentleman anyway, so
okay.
We're here to talk about Stephen P. I want to thank you guys for coming in. Hopefully the audio and my usual problems are no longer that bad of an issue because I thought I had upgraded my stuff, but we'll see. We were just kind of I was sharing my processing stuff with Stephen P, but he couldn't really figure out what was going on.
Yeah, I didn't see percentage of memory use and CPU use. I just, in overall, I feel like StreamYard uses way more resources than I think it deserves to use for what it does.
Well, I know that if I try to do the virtual background, it starts seizing up and pausing my screen. So that's why I quit
process
doing
your image in real time. Yeah, it's a pain.
I don't know if it's because I'm using it's probably a lot of it is because I'm using the free app instead of paying for the upgraded versions of it, but it's too expensive. I can't justify paying that much.
I guess their strategy is to degrade the free version over time until it's just unusable.
Well, my thing is, why isn't YouTube doing this? Like this style of platform, because the only way you can go on with somebody is on vertical, and I don't like the way that looks. It's just very weird.
Yeah, they're pushing the vertical too hard. People are resisting it. The traditional live streamers are resisting it, and we're not discoverable. That's the problem in horizontal.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah, because like people mindlessly scrolling. If you've ever on TikTok, like people mindlessly scroll through TikTok and they'll come across a live, and sometimes I'll just sit and watch it for a few minutes or whatever. But otherwise, I would never go to the platform and see the live going and click on it myself to see what's going on. So it's just kind of put right in front of me. So they're just catering to that audience.
Yeah, I do notice that when I do on the occasion that I do a live stream on vertical, you do tend to get a little bit more of what did I do?
You went choppy robotic for a minute, but I could hear you.
Oh, yeah, I don't know what's going on. I wish there was a better way to. I think I'm gonna have to bite the bullet and go with one of the competitors that is a little bit less expensive.
Maybe so. It'll probably be less resource intensive too. I don't understand why StreamYard like uses so much resources.
Yeah, but oh well. Those are issues to deal with on a different occasion. Yeah. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you so much for accepting the invitation and coming on.
Yeah, sure.
You know, I was really what's the word? Happy or not? Yeah, enamored with the last video you did that you put out on the CO2. And the reason that I found that video so interesting is because it almost seems like um, a lot of the misconceptions that I had and that I've spoken out loud and all that stuff was kind of like you said, okay, I'm gonna take a lot of these stupid nonsense things that he's saying and let me correct the let me correct the
I wasn't
picture I'm
targeting
missing.
you.
No,
It's
no, I know,
those are things that
because
that everybody says. Like a lot of even people who use CO2 have the same kind of misconceptions where they think if anyone's on the fence about it, like don't do it unless you just want all of these high tech, highlight, fussy plants. Otherwise, there's no point in it. And people who use CO2 also will call it like like steroids for plants or something like that. Like it has this misconception that it's something unnecessary in a sense that it's unnatural. Like we are pushing plants further than what they're meant to do. And what in reality we're doing in a closed system in an aquarium is we're limiting plants to what they naturally get in the wild.
well, and a lot of it is just understanding where our plants are coming from, and I think that's
Yeah.
taken me a while to really grasp what it is what these so quote unquote aquatic plants
Mhm.
are doing because part of their life cycle is to actually be acquiring atmosphere CO2 because they're not always meant to be underwater. It's our hobby that's kind of taking them out of their normal
Yeah.
habitat, and we're trying to force them to continuously be growing underwater. And but again, a lot of that is just misinformation. I don't know if it's misinformation. I just think we don't do our due diligence to really research what these plants are, and we're so lazy that we'll take at face value what somebody will say and not necessarily go and research it and find out if what they're saying is accurate or not.
Right. I mean, I think the thing is, it's just plants. That I think that's kind of why we brush it aside. If our plants are doing fine, then they're doing fine. If a plant's not doing well, well, it gets evicted from the fish room because why would you want to bother with something that you're going to struggle with? Because we're fish keepers. I'm a fish keeper. I started out as a fish keeper. I have the plant obsession, but I wouldn't do it if I couldn't keep fish. But I also wouldn't keep fish if I couldn't do the planted tank. So it kind of goes both ways for me. It's like 50-50 for me now. But yeah, I started out just if a plant didn't grow for me, then I would discard it. And then I got more curious about the high tech stuff. So it's just kind of a slow progression into it.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what it's evolved with the plants that I keep. It's just it was trial and error, and then I just kind of resignated myself to the fact that okay, I can only keep these plants because apparently in my mind thinking oh it's on my water parameter only allows for these plants to really thrive. When there's a lot of other factors in there. I know I've always talked about the really high temperatures in my aquariums just because I don't have climate control in, other than a fan running that circulates a little bit of the air. And even that does a little bit of evaporative cooling, but I'm still in the higher 80s on some of these aquariums. And some plants
Yeah.
do not like that.
I mean, that's working against you just because the ability for gases to stay dissolved goes down, oxygen and CO2 as well. So you get less of both. And the thing about plants is like they're more fussy and less resilient than a lot of our fish. Like fish can kind of go with the flow and adapt. There's certain plants that you change one parameter and they just ditch all of their leaves and they have to like regrow from scratch.
Yeah,
So
I
a lot of the
sorry.
parameters that we try to control in like a high tech planted tank are for the plants because the fish are just whatever, as long as you're not poisoning the water, they're fine.
Yeah, and then there's always when you talk CO2, there's the fear of equipment malfunction,
Yeah.
not really understanding it. But what I really find out that a lot of these mistakes and errors that happen is when you try to go the cheap route and you try to do the DIY projects and doing things like that. And a lot of that information doesn't really necessarily get divulged when you go, oh, CO2 sucks. Okay, wow. It might not have just been that it was you were using CO2. It could have been you had a system that ran away on you because you had really inexpensive valves or whatever it is, but that never gets addressed. It's just automatically assumed that the evil villain is the CO2.
Well, I mean, the ugly truth about CO2 injection is that the secret to it working well for you is money. Like, the more you spend on it, the more of a reliable, robust system you're going to get. And you can cheap out on it a little bit, and you can go with like the mass produced regulator with some risk. I feel like a lot of people say they're having success with DIY CO2. I think the issue with DIY CO2 is how many times over several months are you going to be okay with uncapping the reaction and replenishing it with whatever there's citric acid, baking soda reactions, and then starting it back up, dialing it back in, and then repeating again in 3 or 4 weeks. And versus like a 5-pound canister, refilling it every 4 to 6 months. It's just the maintenance. And then when you do that kind of maintenance, you introduce an inconsistent level of CO2 into the system, which plants don't like inconsistency, even if it's like to their benefit. They just don't react. A lot of them don't react well to it. So people kind of give up whenever they go into that, and then they start saying, CO2 is not worth it. Too much of a hassle.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm curious to try out, because I've heard it said too that like plants would really benefit from constant water changes and stuff like that because of the remineralization. And that, for the longest time, I pretty much ran my fish room not necessarily without water changes, but really prolonged water changes. And that's just because I had so many aquariums. Now that I've kind of downsized and really narrowed it down to a few aquariums, I find myself, doing more maintenance, keeping up with what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm really curious to see if there's a visible change on the plants and stuff like that. And have you had an experience with that where you would say, yeah, definitely these things do matter, or it's
yeah. So there's a lot of factors that make water changes good for plants. For one thing, the remineralization is good. Of course, my water, all it has is it's essentially like light baking soda water. I don't have any GH. I have to add that every time I do a water change. But there's the replenishment of minerals, and there's dissolved organic compounds, which is kind of a abstract statement because we cannot measure them at home. We don't with the equipment. They don't show up on a TDS meter, but it is organic carbon that plants cannot use, but it can interfere with their uptake of inorganic compounds like CO2 and nutrients, because there's like a boundary layer on the leaf that can be physically inhibited by certain things. Even like debris in the tank can inhibit them. So that's one thing that a water change will displace. The other thing is if you expose most of your tank to air for a few minutes, you're killing a lot of algae spores that are on the surfaces of leaves and glass and ornaments and whatever else is in your tank. So you kind of attack algae from both ends by first making the plants have a clean environment to grow in, and also drying out the algae spores over and over.
Okay. Yeah. But my biggest fear is always when that's the other thing. I do like larger than normal.
Oh, me too.
Yeah. I do. I for a while there, I was doing more than 100% because I would have the outlet, the hose that I'm using to drain it, and I would turn on the fill and just let it run.
I don't even turn off my my filters when I do water changes, and like I know that I'm ready to switch to another tank when the hang on the back is just screaming because like there's no more water coming in. I'm kind of abusive to my equipment, but those aqua clears, for all their flaws, they keep on trucking for sure.
Yeah, I don't have that issue because I run mostly the little bit of filtration that I do run is all air driven, just because, once you start having a lot of aquariums, you quickly run out of outlets. That's one of the limiting factors with having to run, electrical equipment, besides the cost to run them. But I think the biggest obstacle is you start doing these crazy chain gangs where you have one receptacle and you're putting these big power banks, and then off of that you're running extensions and all the stuff that would cause a fire in your house and you're not supposed to
the
do.
key is you gotta, so if you're daisy chaining all of these power strips, you just feel the cord that's going to the wall. If it's warm, like warmer than your body heat, then you probably want to not do that. But you know, you got to have like you have to have the circuitry that can handle it as well. You don't be pushing all those amps into one cable. Probably
that's been the other plus of downsizing equipment. Just because, you know, the garage has only got 3 receptacles. One of them's a GFC or whatever it is, one of those breaker ones that when you, I know, I actually 2 of them. The 2 that are there, the one on the roof isn't, and I've used an extension cord off of that and ran some other tanks. Never checking it, and one day when I was rearranging it for the last iteration that I had, I went to go remove the cord and it was brittle and hard, and I looked and it was already starting to get dark around the socket. I was like, oh, that's not good. And but that's one of the reasons why I got rid of a lot of electronics and started doing more air, because then that's just one outlet that you're using.
Yeah, I get that.
You know, so
my fish room is a cable nightmare. Like it's one of those things that I just sort of avoid in my brain, but I know it's coming because I'm going to be doing some consolidation and rearranging, and my mind is going to not let me do that unless I do an overhaul of cable management. Because it's crazy, and I probably do need to consolidate. Like what I really hate are those all-in-ones, because there's like a cable for the light, there's a cable for the stupid pump in there, there's a cable if I've got a heater going in there. It's just, I could probably just have one light across multiple tanks at the top, and then some sponge filters, and then it's just basically one cable per row, essentially, if I don't do heaters.
Now the heaters that you're running, because all your tanks are indoors, right?
Yeah, they are.
Do you run your AC really, really cold at home, or?
You better believe it. Year round. It is 68, 67.
Okay.
And the in our bedroom we have a separate AC, like a portable AC, that we will crank that one so that it runs all night. Like I set it to 62, which is like an unattainable goal in the summer, but it just keeps it running.
Now, is CO2, is there an issue if you're running CO2 with water temperature? Is that something you really need? Because like I said, mine right now, if I'm running, you know, like 89, 88, that's kind of common for the average temperature in my aquarium. If I were to use CO2, is that because already at that temperature, you know, you have a low oxygen, you know, available oxygen in the aquarium.
Yeah.
Running a CO2, will that deplete even the oxygen more, or is that a non-issue?
So warm water has less solubility of all gases, so that includes CO2. The temperature is, I mean, it's working against you for sure, and there are certain plants that just don't tolerate those temperatures regardless of dissolved CO2 levels, and so I don't know what they are because I don't run tanks that warm, so I have no idea what they are. But you probably will run into issues where if you start doing the high tech, you'll run into issues where certain plants are not going to respond well to the high temperature regardless. As far as like depleting the oxygen, CO2 itself does not displace oxygen.
Okay.
Like you can have the same amount of dissolved oxygen and introduce CO2 as well. But what it does for the fish is there's a concentration gradient in the water, and then there's a concentration in the fish. And if the concentration in the water and the fish get too equalized, then they can't diffuse it out from their blood, because it's a passive diffusion. It requires a concentration gradient so that diffusion basically is like particles going from high concentration to lower concentration to equalize. So they can't take in oxygen if their blood is still full of CO2. So that's the suffocation. Then they get like acidosis or whatever in their blood. It's not pretty, and it's avoidable, but it's also a valid fear for sure.
Yeah, because the other thing that I've heard, and not necessarily with CO2, but like with heavily planted aquariums, that because during daylight or when you have your lights on, they're supposed to be producing oxygen, I think. and then when you turn off your lights at night, or it goes, dark, it starts releasing CO2. Do I have that correct?
Well, yeah, but like I think what people get wrong about that is that that's just respiration from the plants, and plants are doing that 24 hours a day. They're releasing CO2 and taking in oxygen 24 hours a day. Photosynthesis is a separate process from respiration that only happens when the lights are on, and there's a threshold, and it's dictated by lighting level, and it's different in every plant. It's like the light compensation point, essentially, where there's just enough light where they are taking in as much CO2 as they are expelling, and they are producing as much oxygen as they are taking in. And then you increase the light a little bit higher than that, then they start actually taking in CO2 and growing. So it's the reason CO2 builds up at night is because plants are not using it. They're just respirating as they do as normal. And so you get a little bit higher concentration that gets used up pretty quickly in the morning.
So based off of that, would you recommend then, instead of having a long photo period, breaking up your photo period throughout the day and increments of hours to kind of have that process happen?
That is the great debate, the siesta. I don't know if I've seen any measurable difference.
Okay.
In my opinion, I think the what you want to do with your photo period is set it to a time where you're enjoying your tank. Like, don't do a low-tech tank and run your lights like 15 hours a day, because that's going to be a problem. Your plants are not going to like that. But I run mine. My lights turn on at noon and turn off at like 9:30 at night, because I'm either working or asleep before noon. I don't really get to my tanks before noon, so there's no point in running the light for that. And some people do a siesta just because like they're in their fish room in the morning, and then they come back to it later in the evening. So they do 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the evening, or something like that. I think it's just about what your schedule is. I don't think it really matters a whole lot.
Yeah, and that's kind of what my current light schedule is that I run it for about 4 hours in the morning, and then in the evening, because a lot of the times I'm either getting off of work from coming off of graveyard, so I'll run in the garage and take a look, see what's going on, or I'm going to work really late at night. So so I found that to kind of work for me in a way. To say that it eliminates or reduces the amount of algae I grow, that's debatable, because I think it's more in how many nutrients I have in there, because I do play with different types of substrate combinations, and I think that's more of a factor than the light cycle. But it's just you always hear those arguments where with plants is, especially with people that are dealing with algae, and the first thing they tell them is, cut back on your light cycle. But I don't know. I think there's other factors than just the light that are at play.
Well, I think people blame nutrients a little bit too much for algae. I think because carbon is absolutely the bottleneck for growth. So, and the light intensity is what dictates how much CO2 a plant demands. So if you increase the lights and you don't have enough CO2, like in a low-tech tank, if you run a bright light, then you will use up all the CO2 that accumulated overnight. And then your plants sort of have to adjust to that declining amount of CO2. They have to do that every single day. They start off with abundant CO2, and then the concentration gradient changes in the water, and so it diffuses even slower and slower into the plant, to a point where they really can't take in any at all. If they can't take in any CO2, then they can't use nutrients, and then they start showing deficiency signs that people think are nutrient deficiencies, but they're just carbon deficiencies, or say like carbon-induced nutrient deficiencies, because they can't use the nutrients. And that's when you see like a stem plant that looks leggy, where the top is growing nice, but the bottom half just has no leaves at all, because they're consuming the leaves because they're trying to get those resources, because they're out of resources in the water. And people think it's a light issue, which it can be, and oftentimes it is, but in some cases you increase the light and it works against you and makes things worse because the plants are just being told to grow into overdrive, but you don't have the food for them.
I tend to notice that even more as plants get higher to the surface, when especially when you let them fold over the top, that really starts happening where the bottom portion of the stem really starts dropping all its leaves.
Yeah, it's
And
just
I don't
it
know if
puts
that's
on mass, and it like the bigger a plant gets, the more CO2 it needs. Like because they have to also maintain those leaves, and so you get that early leaf senescence whenever you have a limited amount of resources because the plant its directive is to grow and survive. And so once it sees that it has a limited amount of resources, it's going to focus on the fresher new growth versus the old crap that it's trying to maintain. So it just abandons those right off the bat. Some of them are worse than others. Like, you ever had hornwort?
Yes.
Hornwort, if you change anything about it, it just says peace out to all of its leaves. It just drops all its needles.
Yeah, that's the one plant that I can't kill. But I don't know
Oh
if
yeah.
it's
Well, you
because of
can't kill it, but it gets annoying because it'll shed all of its leaves and regrow because it wants to grow. It just I don't know, it's just very finicky. I guess because it has the ability to use nutrients really quickly because it can use your carbonate and not just your CO2. And so all it's got to do is just shed all the old crap and grow something new, kind of like a crypt.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's very successful in my waters because I have high GH and KH in my water because it's basically now the only reason I don't deal with that issue is because we put a water softener into the house. But prior to that, any evaporation would leave a lot of calcium buildup on the side of the aquarium. I get it now, but it's nowhere near. I mean, it would be like salt crawl. If you ever see salt crawl in a saltwater tank where it looks like big parts of crystals, of the salt crystallizing, that's how bad our calcium is in our water. And it's almost to the point where you have to put in a water softener system or you're going to be destroying your pipes real quick.
Yeah, I can imagine. Do you measure your KH or have you ever measured it?
I use strips and it's always maxed out.
Okay. So that's another thing that works against you with plant growth, unless you are using hornwort, guppy grass, anacharis, vallisneria, dwarf sagittaria. Those are ones that, even though it's not their preferred source of carbon, they will use your bicarbonate, your KH in your water, because they have the enzymes that will convert it to CO2. But other plants that need that little bit of CO2, you have even less of it bioavailable in a high KH tank because it's tied up in the carbonate cycle. So there's like 4 species of carbon in your water, no matter how you add it. And your pH sort of dictates your proportion of CO2 to bicarbonate to carbonate. And so the more carbonate you have, then the higher your pH tends to be, and the higher the total dissolved inorganic carbon tends to tilt to the carbonate side.
When it comes to plants, I don't know, and I think even fish in general. It was a while since I heard this, but it kind of resurfaced again, and Brandon kind of brought it up and talking about TDS. I've never found that to be a useful metric for myself because TDS doesn't really tell me anything useful for my TDS is always going to be high just because of the water that we have, but I don't know exactly which solid is the one that's being dissolved in my water. So I don't know. I know that gets thrown around a lot, but I don't know how useful. And I think the biggest one that I hear constantly talking about that is Lucas Bretz, that he's always checking his TDS and TDS, but I've never been able to use that as a metric that's of any value for me.
Yeah, it's useful if you have an RO system and you want to make sure that it's still making RO water and you don't have to replace the membrane or the or any other chambers for it. And I guess it's useful if you are taking that RO water and putting it in a vat and remineralizing, and you remember exactly how much you need to add to get a certain TDS. It's a quick check. But if you're putting your TDS meter in your water and you have no baseline for what is composed of, then yeah, I don't understand why anyone would use that.
Yeah, because that's like one of those another knee-jerk responses that you always hear in forums or when people are asking, "Hey, what could be wrong?" And it's TDS, and I'm like, "Yeah, well, so what does that mean?"
I mean, it can be, but you really just need to know what it is, because you can't say that my TDS, like if I put my TDS meter in my tap water, it's about 125 ppm. Someone might say that's like medium hard. But then what is the definition of hard? Because my tap water has 0 GH. So it is just as soft as RO water. It's just as soft as my parents' well water that's 30 minutes away. They have like, I don't know, 7 ppm TDS because there's next to nothing in their water. Most of that TDS is coming from like bicarbonate and a little bit of sodium. So that's not really hard water. It doesn't really tell you anything.
Yeah. One of the things that I've also kind of heard mentioned and stuff like that, but I don't think it's an issue with me, but especially like with people that don't have a lot of minerals in the water, is adding salt. But isn't salt detrimental to plants, or do a minimal amount of salt actually help benefits plants?
No, I mean, no, plants don't really like sodium or chloride. Like maybe they use it a little bit, but it very, very quickly can increase to toxic amounts. The reason I have sodium in my water is just the way our aquifer is. Like it's the Southern Hills aquifer. It serves all of Baton Rouge, and I think that's all it serves. And it's all the collected rainwater, river water, comes into our clay, and then acidifies minerals. It becomes mineralized, and then as it goes through the clay, it actually gets the cations, which are like your GH, your calcium, your magnesium. They get absorbed by the clay, and the clay releases sodium ions. And then it leaves behind the carbonate that's from the dissolved minerals. And so and then the pH plays a role in whether you have mostly carbonate or bicarbonate. We mostly have bicarbonate in every aquarium system. And so you just have basically dissolved baking soda in the water, but just a little bit, not a whole lot.
Yeah, no. Now, the whole thing with plants and you, is it something that you've always been involved with plants, or is it something you gradually kind of started liking more? How many years of experience, I guess, you have with dealing with plants and aquariums and stuff like that?
Plants and aquariums. I mean, so when I was in the hobby as like a dumbass teenager, doing dumbass things, I didn't know you could keep live plants in an aquarium, or if you could, I wasn't going to be the person who was capable of doing that. So I didn't really get into putting plants in an aquarium until like 2019.
Okay.
And then figuring that out, which was that, it's been a journey, and then becoming an obsession over time.
So what was it that made you decide, okay, I want to go the planet route, and what was kind of like the gateway to you getting into and learning more and more and more? Because now I know that you and Kelly, when you guys do your with your hands, or with your plants live stream, well, obviously you're a long ways from when you started. So what was it that decided to get you into doing more of the plants? Well, was it somebody's channel that you saw, or is it just just kind of stumbled into it by accident?
I don't know if it's a specific channel. I mean, I've always liked plants, but having them not underwater has always been a problem, because I will forget to water them, and then I will try to come back and compensate to overwater them. So I've killed a lot of houseplants just from wanting them and then forgetting that they need the water. So like putting them underwater really helps a lot with that. Same with the pond plants outside. I don't have to water them. And mean, nowadays you can automate things, so it makes it a little bit easier. So I probably will start branching out into slightly more terrestrial stuff in the fish room as well. But yeah, I just, I don't know, I like them. And then when I started looking up like tips for getting more plants to grow, then I started stumbling across these ridiculous high-tech aquascapes, the Dutch scapes out there, and like, how the hell do you do that? So I started looking into that, and then my eyes glaze over because it's overwhelming amount of information and technical stuff, and I'm like, I'm going to come back to that later. And then you just sort of pick up a few things along the way. It's definitely not, you can't really get a crash course in it unless you are just have this ability to absorb a crap ton of information at once, and that's not how I operate. If I get inundated with information, then I just sort of shut down.
Now, one of the things that I'm kind of curious, because I'm kind of limited in not only one, information about plants, two, access to plants, but one of the things that I did notice, and this is kind of like in the houseplant industry, where they started going to certain trends and doing some variegation of certain plants. I'm starting to see a little bit more of that in the aquatic industry. Is that something that's really happening where they're kind of, because what did I see the other day? I think it was like some anubias that was variegated that I hadn't seen before. Is that like a trend that is starting to infiltrate itself into the aquarium hobby? And from what you've seen,
it's been like that for a while. Just those cultivars that couldn't survive in the wild. But yeah, I'm kind of a sucker for variegated plants. I don't know if you saw in the video when I was talking about the CO2 low light part of it. I had this big piece of variegated anubias that I got at the Keystone Clash last year. I paid like $65 for it. It's way too much for a plant. But like I said, I'm a sucker for those variegated ones. I really like it.
Yeah, because I remember, what was it, the pink flamingo that was you couldn't watch a video anywhere where people were talking about it, and it seems like it's gone away. I don't hear anybody mention it anymore. Was that one of those failed trends, or?
Well, a few people are getting it to work well. I'm sort of realizing what it takes to get it to work, and just have to decide whether I care enough. And it's one of my nemesis plants. Like, I can't really explain why I can't get it to grow very well other than the source. But pink flamingo is like a defect. It's a defective plant. The same thing is like, I mean, it's not the same thing, but it's similar to Anubias white, like the ones that have the straight up white leaves. Well, they don't have chlorophyll. They're not meant to grow that way. You can't do that. So they'll sit in that glucose gel in vitro, and they'll do fine. As soon as they have to photosynthesize in the real world, they kind of fall apart, unless you're like babying it and just like, I don't even know exactly what is involved in getting one of those to thrive. I've seen people get them to thrive. I've seen people sell trimmings of theirs. I'm not there yet. I don't know if I want to be there, but I'm sure eventually, just for the sake of the challenge, I probably will.
I just kind of remember that if you there was a time in where you couldn't watch a video where that was not like the plant that people were always talking about. It was.
I think it's because the co-op started selling it. In fact, I didn't know it existed until the co-op started selling it. But they stopped selling it, I think, because they couldn't get a reliable supply of it. But I can't imagine too many people were very happy to buy a plant from a place that's known for selling the easy plants, the stuff that most people can get to grow. And that was kind of the one outlier where most people are going to absolutely fail with that plant. Well, and it was like $30 too.
Based on the comments, you're not the only one that struggled with it. I think I bought one at one point and it just kind of disappeared. I don't know what happened to it.
I think I've bought like 5 over the years. I have 3 right now that are the bare minimum definition of not dead. So there's still a little bit of hope, I guess.
Yeah. The other plant that I think, and I don't know if it's kind of hit a plateau now, is Buse. And it was so funny because you hear these Buse, the Buses to me are like corals in that the names that they put on them are bullshit.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is like,
Yeah.
they'll be like, this is a blue buse. And you look
Yep.
at it, sucker's green. I don't know where you're getting the blue from.
Well, no, there's no such thing as a blue plant. They don't have. There's no blue pigment in a plant. They have iridophores that will reflect light and make it look blue if you look at it that way, and also like have some blue light on it. That helps a lot. But the blue ones are a little kind of a scam, but not really. There are some that grow pink. I have and yeah, you're gonna let the names are so stupid, but I have one that's called Brownie Ghost 2011. It's one of the few that I actually care about the name because it's a rare one. I think I paid like, I don't know, $50 for 4 leaves of it, but it's growing well. It's a nice deep purple. But for it to be a nice deep purple, you have to get like the original cutting of it. Maybe. Okay. That's just what people say. Like there's a lot of lore behind Boost that I don't know.
Well, one of them that it comes from a worn-torn area, and that's the big one that you keep hearing.
Well, also a lot of it was illegally harvested from the wild and decimating ecosystems just to sell it in the aquarium trade. And now they grow a lot of them in vitro, so it's not a big of a deal. But you do want to check to see where they might be coming from if you're concerned about people illegally harvesting them. And I don't know what's involved in illegally harvesting them, but it's probably not a good thing.
Yeah, no, but it's just, I always, the longer I'm in this hobby, it's funny that you get to see certain trends and how they kind of cycle through. And it's like everything else in life, it'll have its moments where it hits a peak, it's real trendy, then it drops, and then some years will go by, people forget about it, and then all of a sudden it starts coming back up again. But it's exactly the same thing that happened a few years back. I don't know how big our cycles are. Like with, the one thing that really comes to mind is fashion. Fashion every about 10 to 20 years, it kind of rears his head again. So I've kind of see that a lot more with the fish is what I've noticed. But I don't know, do plants kind of go through the same thing where there's certain plants that were real popular, say 5 years ago, and now nobody even cares about them, or they tend to be a little bit more consistent?
Yeah, I haven't noticed much of a cycle, although like occasionally, I guess some of the slower growers or things that aren't as popular, they'll pop up on the Facebook group, the Planted Take Quick Auctions, and that's where I will see a plant. Like if I'm going to see a plant for the aquarium trade that I've never heard of, it's going to be on that page. And it's going to be some kind of weird Blixa or some variant of Boost, or maybe it's just the same Boost that somebody renamed, because I have a lot of those and I don't keep track of the names. I love Boost though. I hoard a bunch of it. But I don't know if there's much of a cycle. I think they're the plants that are tried and true that mostly everyone has success with, and so those are the ones that are being sold the most, and then the rest is just sort of specialty crap that's probably more cyclical than anything else, but I haven't noticed a pattern, at least not yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I'm just kind of checking him because I've seen a couple of people pop in here that didn't have a wrench by their name. So I'm trying to do a little bit of housekeeping at the same time.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where I've always kind of been curious. I kind of sit back and watch, and I think I notice it more because of where I'm at. I'm kind of isolated, so I don't get to follow the trends. What I have is what I've had from the day that I started keeping aquariums. Once in a while, I'll come across something odd or different because I'll either go to a swap or a convention or something that will have out of the ordinary stuff. But for the longest time, my fish room was just like a replica of PetSmart, because that's what I had access to. So a lot of it is a lot of live bears that I've had, through most of the time that I've been keeping aquariums. But I had plants, like I said, I've got to almost say that I've been limited to maybe about 6 or 7 species of plants because they're the ones that do well. And it's just the very basic ones. I have like Rotala, rotundifolia, the basic one.
Hmm.
I have Luigia,
Yeah,
the
Ludwigia or
Luigia,
Ludwigia. I
and
don't know.
yeah, that one.
I say them how I say them, and I'm not going to change. I don't know. I don't know if they're right or not.
That one does pretty well, but it's the most basic one. It's not even any of the. Well, that's not true. The Ovalis does pretty well for me. Um,
Yeah,
I don't know why.
Ovalis, Repens. There's like a. I have an Arcuata Repens cross that I can put in most things that have just even a little bit of light. They're going to do fine. Yeah. Then
Yeah,
there's certain Ludwigias where you have to have a KH of less than 2, and you have to blast the CO2. Like Inclinata is one of them.
no,
And
is that because that plant is mostly supposed to be immersed instead of submersed?
yeah, it's usually about where it comes from and the cycles that it lives through. And I don't know much about that one. Like I just started growing that one because I used to not even bother adjusting my KH, and I was just, if it doesn't do well in 7 KH, I just didn't bother with it. So I haven't learned much about it. It's growing, it's fine. You know, I don't know if it's worth propagating a lot because there's not too many people I can send it to. So otherwise, I'm just throwing away a bunch of stems and wasting real estate, I guess. But I'll go through cycles of being obsessed with a certain plant, and then I'll either reduce the quantity or just completely get rid of it.
Yeah, one of the things that I really found interesting from that video that you did about the CO2, and you just kind of touched on it a little bit, was the misconception that I had about, low light plants don't require CO2. That information to me really was interesting and fascinating because it really kind of blew me away because I was all this time I was very sure that these plants are not going to need it. But the explanation behind it I thought was really interesting. And I had never heard that before, or maybe not paid attention, but I know that was the one thing that really resonated with me and stuck with me.
Right. I mean, because the divide in the plant hobby, well, first the divide is like, do you care about the plants enough that they keep you in the hobby, or are they just sort of your breeding ground for your fish? Are they backdrops? Are they decorations? And then the other divide is plants that need CO2 and plants that don't, which is kind of, I guess, not quite accurate because every plant needs CO2. Even the ones that you can just put in any tank and it seems like they'll grow in a toilet, they still have to use CO2 in order to grow. It's just they can survive on a limited amount. So every plant will benefit from extra CO2 just because the concentration of CO2 in water is really low and it moves around really slowly. So if you have more of those CO2 molecules moving really slowly, then more of them will reach the plant, at the same speed, but they'll be able to get more faster, I guess. So it allows the older leaves to last longer. It allows them to put more energy towards color and robustness and growth and like shorter internodes and just random things like that, where the plants just look better and they
Yeah.
grow better.
Yeah, one of the things that I was kind of curious too, to kind of your perspective from that, because you keep a lot of plants, and I keep some, but not nearly the amount of different species as you do. When Skeptical Aquatics came out, and he started talking about that plants did not need substrate to be able to grow, that information to me was kind of interesting, and I was kind of curious to see. Uh, do plants necessarily need do they do a lot of uptake of their nutrients through the roots, or is it all strictly from the water column?
They will uptake nutrients through their leaves and their roots.
Okay.
And so they don't need substrate. It helps if you need something for them to anchor to, for sure.
Okay.
But the benefit of having a nutrient rich substrate is not that you need solids to hold on to nutrients, because plants, no matter if they're terrestrial or if they're underwater, they need the nutrients to be dissolved in water for them to absorb them. It's like they're in solution. Now in the substrate, there's something called a rhizosphere, which is like this barrier around the leaf root system where there is a higher concentration of CO2. The soil is more acidic, and the concentration of nutrients in the water is very high. And so the benefit of that is you don't have to regularly fertilize your water column in some cases, like if you're doing low tech, because you have this supply of nutrients of most nutrients in your substrate. So it helps a lot. Now, the whole idea of like root feeders versus water column feeders, that's not really the case. They all have the ability to take in nutrients through their leaves and through their roots. And it's the same thing with like an Amazon sword, for example. But the benefit of having a nutrient-rich substrate for an Amazon sword is because their root system, I don't know if you ever planted an Amazon sword and then tried to uproot it later. Yeah. And you essentially pull your entire substrate with it, because it just the root system has spread. Yeah. It spreads like mad. And so that's a lot of surface area for them to outcompete other rooted plants, and they can absorb a crap ton of nutrients. But at the same time, their leaves are thick and robust, and they're not just sprouting leaves like mad, like a Ludwigia or a Rotala. And so they can't really compete as well for water column nutrients. So you're just kind of giving the Amazon sword more of a fighting chance to grow, to absorb nutrients by giving nutrients in the soil or whatever substrate that you're using versus in the water column. So just kind of a balance. Like there's an art to growing a combination of plants in a tank, and it's recognizing how they respond to certain conditions, how they absorb nutrients, how fast they grow, what lighting they need versus what lighting they can tolerate. So that's been part of the challenge as well. And then injecting CO2 kind of equalizes a lot of that, where you don't have to worry as much about lighting levels. You don't have to do low light. You don't have to do high light. You can do just medium, moderate light. And then everything grows pretty well without you having to like tuck an Anubias in the darkest part of the tank and have to worry about algae as much.
Yeah. With the CO, going back to the CO2, I've always felt that with CO2, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to somebody that is just starting the hobby, because it just seems like they might get overwhelmed.
Well, it's just another piece of equipment, you know. It's like you start making a shopping list for a new hobbyist. Like you want to make the shopping list as short as possible. I mean, for me, because I would get overwhelmed by all of it. It's like learning a different part of the hobby. Yeah,
and the reason I say that is because I see a lot of new hobbyists that want to get into the plants, but they're cutting corners because they don't want to. The equipment is very expensive, so they want to go with these home DIYs, the ones that you buy the caps that you put on the plastic bottle, and that kind of system, and it never ends up working out well for. I don't think I've ever seen anybody that's been able to run that system for a prolonged period of time without any issues.
I've never used one, because the smart plant people that I talked to, they had already been there, done that, and they said, if you're into it and you can afford it, just skip that and go, because eventually, if you are going to get into it, eventually you're going to wind up in the big boy system, the full system. So I skipped it. So I can't really say definitively what their limitations are. I just in theory, it seems like more of a pain in the ass to me.
Yeah, because I know I get asked, because I do have some plants in my aquariums, and they'll ask me, it's like, oh, are you running CO2? It's like, no, I'm not running CO2. And I always tell them it's because I don't have any high requirement plants or any, stuff like that. But come to find out that's, by the video that you put out, that's not really correct either. I mean,
well, I mean, it's because of the cost. Like if you just have a jungle of Vallisneria in a tank, like putting CO2 into that, you're not going to really feel accomplished or fulfilled unless your goal is to sell Vallisneria. then increase production. I think the best part of CO2 is just the increase in variety of plants, like the fun side of it.
Yeah, but the thing that I always find interesting is it's usually new hobbyists that are always asking me about that. It's like they want to do everything. They want to get to that step really, really quick. And it's kind of like, you know what? I don't know if you necessarily having to use CO2 would be in your best option, just because there's going to be a lot of other issues you're going to have to deal with an aquarium that is just starting to cycle itself. The last thing you need to do is add another multiplier to that could create a lot more other problems.
I made that mistake too as a beginner. Because I think a common mistake is you get your tank set up and you notice your plants are just not doing well, and you see other people's plants are doing really well, and you think, oh, the key is CO2, in which it is. But if you have a crappy algae-ridden tank and you start injecting CO2 and you start making all these other adjustments that people say to make, like increasing your light, increasing your nutrients, you start changing 4 variables at the same time, you're not really learning anything. And you might still fail at it just because you change too much and you haven't given the plants the chance to actually adjust. And I did that as well. Like, I wasn't happy with the way the tank looked, and I was like, I'm just going to put CO2 on it. And it helped. It would have helped a lot more if I'd understood why it was helping.
Yeah. Now, in your opinion, and based off of your experience, a lot of these plants, there's a default list of plants that are supposed to be beginner plants for people that are starting out. Do you feel like those plants are adequately in that they're the right plants to be on that list, or have you found that there's actually plants that are probably a lot easier and don't get promoted as much as the typical Java fern, Anubias, those kind of plants?
Well, I don't think that Java fern belongs on that list of easy plants, and it frequently does appear on the easy plant list. And I think the easy plant list changes depending on the location of the person talking about it. There are people in the hobby, people on YouTube, that have never lived anywhere besides where they live now. And they happen to live in a place like the Pacific Northwest, for example, where the water is very soft, has very low pH, and you don't have to do a lot to get plants to grow very well. And you have an affinity for the plants. You feel like you have a green thumb, because things work out a lot better in that softer water. And so you find the ones that seem to do well regardless, and you put them on a list of easy plants, but then you translate that to basically the rest of the country. I mean, like, God, I think I read somewhere there's like 150,000 water companies serving the United States alone, or maybe like in 50,000 water sources. Like, that's how diverse just our tap water is. And you'll find that, like, they're not all going to respond the same way. And Java fern is one of those that really doesn't like hard water, like high KH water. You can get
how much of that do you think it's
but
how much of that do you think it's the aquarium co-op effect? Because they seem to push that one a lot as being a easy beginner plant. Because I'm seeing the comments again, and a lot of that. I'm one of them. I can't keep fern, Java fern in my aquariums.
Yeah, I mean, I think the co-op probably has a lot of influence on that, because they promote the planted community tank. I mean, the co-op is what got me started with planted community tanks. But there's a certain point where I'm like, they're saying this is supposed to work, but it's not. So I need to go and consult other sources and figure this out. And that's when you sort of figure out how your system responds and how plants respond to your system and your water, and understand your water and the nuances there. But I mean, broadly, the easy plants are pretty easy. And there's certain parts of the country where there is no such thing as an easy plant, except for maybe hornwort or guppy grass.
Yeah, I found that hornwort and guppy grass thrive in my aquariums, where some of the other plants are kind of hit or miss. And I've always thought that maybe it was because, the high temperatures. I do notice that my plants always look better in our winters, but our winters are nowhere near most of the country either.
Mhm.
Our winters are relatively mild compared to the national average. And
So your tanks
and
get
I
in the high 80s in the summer, or like 90s or so? And then how cold do they get?
they're getting in the high 80s. They'll be 87, 89, around there, depending on how hot it is outside too. It And that's just because the only thing I run is just like a shop fan that just blows air around, and I don't have any lids. I had to get rid of lids because if not, I would trap all that heat inside the aquarium.
Ooh.
I do have to deal with a lot of evaporation. That is
Yeah, I was gonna say
the
it's so
one.
freaking dry. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so it's not uncommon if I don't do a top off in 3 days, it's very noticeable. It'll be about almost 3 to 4 inches of just water evaporating off the surface. Um,
Oof.
but that's the dry heat and the constant air obviously expedites that. But if I don't do that, my temperatures would get much higher. And uh, I know that one of the things that I think, and this is just through my situation is I think the only reason I don't have these massive die-offs of fish is because there is no drastic swings in the temperatures. Um, Even if I do a water change, the water is just probably hotter, not hotter than the ambient temperature that I'm in.
Oh yeah.
It's not uncommon that I need to let it run um, probably about 10, 15 minutes to flush out all that heat that was trapped in the pipes. And even when I put it in, it might be, maybe a 3 to 4 degree difference. So there's no like I do a water change to cool off my tanks. That does not exist here. On the contrary, I think I'll get them hotter than what they were. It's
Oh,
the opposite effect.
I mean, yeah, in the summer here, I'm doing 85-degree water changes and in a 75-degree tank, and I don't even let the water cool off. I just do it. When the fish are fine. The plants probably hate it more than the fish, honestly. Plants can be really bitchy. I would, I mean,
Yeah.
if you're gonna do CO2 injection, put it on a tank in your house. I think you'll
Yeah.
have a lot better success with it, and I think your wife will like the way it looks whenever it gets growing. It'll look like a showpiece. So I would say put it in the best place in your house where
Yeah,
you
and
see it
that
the
was always
most.
the plan. That was always the plan if I decided to do that. Was if I was gonna run to it has to be in here because not only that, I can stay on top of it, just simply checking to make sure that the cylinders have pressure in it and stuff
Hmm.
like that. Um, but yeah, no, definitely it would have to be in here. I wouldn't keep it out in the garage unless now, even if I air condition the garage, I don't think I would still run it there just because I spend most of my time here inside the house. So I just feel like I would be more on top of if there was a sudden change or, for some reason it doesn't shut off and you get the typical fish gasping at the air on the top of the aquarium.
Right.
I would be able to see that here. Whereas if they're in the garage, that could it could go way too
Yeah.
long before I catch it. And who knows if anybody will survive.
That's why all the tanks that I have are ones that I'm going to see once per day just from like moving about the house. Like I couldn't have a traditional closed off fish room because
Yeah.
if the door is closed and I'm not deliberately going there, I'm not going to even remember that I have tanks. And I will wear that pattern in really quickly if I neglect it for long enough. Then it becomes like more of a chore to go in there rather than enjoyable. So they have to be integrated into the house for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, uh, if I were to do that, I wouldn't have a fish room. I would have one or two aquariums, and that's probably it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of almost by default happening that way. And that's just because again, it's just lack of time. I was trying to do the lazy breeding where the
Colony
hands
breeding.
off. You just set them up and forget them. But even those, you still have to. go in there, check, see what's going on. Are you
Mm-hmm.
getting any eggs and stuff like that? So right now, I just don't have the time to do that. I've always said maybe when I retire and all I have to do is go hang out in the fish room, that might change. But as of right now, I think I'm going to go back to just having display tanks and enjoy them for what they are. It's not have to. Uh, you don't, just because you have a fish room doesn't mean that you have to be breeding stuff. I mean, you have the tanks because you really enjoy them.
Yeah, like I did a video at the beginning of this year that was all about that, where like I was assessing my tanks and deciding, like, is this one fun? Because that's the only reason I have the tanks is for fun. And I said, like, I'm not much of a breeder. I like it when they colony breed. It's fun to see surprise fry, but in terms of harvesting eggs, putting them in breeder boxes and all that, and making sure that I'm feeding them several times a day, I can maybe do one breeding project at a time if I'm motivated for it. But then I have to like find a dedicated spot for it. And it just, I like display tanks, and then the breeder boxes don't look good. So it bothers me. And maybe, I mean, 5 years from now, I could have just a crap ton of bare bottom 10-gallon tanks with nothing but breeding projects going on, because that's just the way my mind goes. Like I jump from interest to interest, but for now I just don't see myself doing that.
Beto's asking a question: if you have any tips for Christmas moss, starting a new tank and was going to tie it to a fake branch.
Tips for Christmas moss, or really any moss, is making sure that you don't have it directly under light, and you are taking extra care when you're doing a water change of, like, don't take a turkey baster or something and just get all the crap out of the fronds, because otherwise that stuff becomes an algae magnet. Mm-hmm. I'm not a big fan of moss. I don't use a lot of it, but that's kind of the way you get it to work. Or you just have a tank full of shrimp that are constantly in there cleaning it for you.
Now that's a plant that does not like temperature in their water. I noticed
not at all.
Because I noticed that it's that boom in my cooler temperature.
It'll turn completely brown on you and disintegrate. Yeah.
Once the summer starts, and usually it's so funny because I'll have a few little strands that'll make it through the summer, and I'll forget. I think it's all died off, and then once it starts cooling off and the temperatures are more in the higher 60s, 70s, it starts thriving, and that's when I realized, oh, I had moss in there, because it'll just start growing. But yeah, that's one plant that I quickly learned does not like the higher temperatures at all.
Yeah. I think there was a question from Any Fish Will Do, like right above that. I'm trying to find it again.
Let me see if I can. Okay, that's the Java moss. Beto.
Oh, here we go. What's your suggestions on the CO2 system for value? Also, what the few mistakes do first time CO2 make? So like I was saying earlier, I don't have a lot of experience with like the low cost value systems. And I think spending the money up front you'll have a much better experience with it. So that is kind of one mistake that people make with CO2 injection for the first time, is they try to cheap out on it. And so there's just little like quirks that make it kind of a pain in the ass, and then they just don't do it anymore. And I think the biggest mistake that people make is that they don't inject enough CO2 because of the fear that they're going to kill their fish. And so they'll put it on like a 55-gallon tank, and they'll run like 2 bubbles a second, and that's essentially nothing. So like I would say, yeah, the bubble counter thing is kind of a trap too, because people want to count their bubbles. But if you I'm injecting in like a 40-gallon tank, and when I got the bubble rate dialed in, you can't count them. It's a steady string of bubbles, and it looks like an extreme amount of CO2. And so I'd say invest in a good pH meter, and that's how you really check your CO2 levels.
No, is that what that little green cone that they put in there is? That a pH meter? Or?
Yeah, I mean it's like a rudimentary pH meter, and I like those too because they do a good job of telling you that, hey, your CO2 canister is empty because the liquid will be blue. But what the liquid is just RO water with a little bit of a bicarbonate source added to raise the water to exactly, I think it's 4 degrees kH. And then they add a bunch of the, like the pH liquid test, the blue liquid in there, and it measures the pH of that water in the drop checker, not your actual tank water. And so it's a good gauge of, like, if it turns lime green, that indicates that the liquid dropped by about 1.0 pH. It's not perfect, but it is kind of a starting point. I think it's handy for a beginner. It's just, the issue is, because of the KH is sort of dictates how hard it is to drop your pH and get that dissolved bioavailable CO2. So if you have water where the KH is like 20 degrees and you put a drop checker in there and it's lime green, you're probably still not injecting enough. It's going to be like piss yellow before you have a sufficient amount of dissolved CO2 to get some of those trickier plants to grow. So it can be kind of, I don't know. Yeah, it's a good beginner thing. It's a good beginner starting point, but I like a good pH meter, well calibrated. Kelly does not, but I disagree. I think it's very handy.
Now, what's your opinion on the ones that I think API makes them? They're like a little plastic thing that you stick to the glass, and it's a little pinwheel that turns, I guess, depending on what I've never really understood how that would work, and I don't see it. I can't believe that thing is actually accurate.
I've never used one. I just like I only worry about pH in my CO2 injected tanks anyway. And and you want to get some level of precision with those little wheel things, that's just sort of a range that you can just put a test strip in there and get the same sort of readout with those. I do like the ammonia checker that they sell, though, the same kind of thing. The good thing about that one is it tells you your free ammonia and not just your total ammonia. And so you know when to freak out whenever that pad changes.
Yeah. Jeff, I already did because he's asking me to. Okay, but I know for those of you that are new, like you and Andrew Whitaker and stuff like that. I don't expect people to moderate in my channel. The reason I do the wrenches is because for convenience. And the reason I say that is because if you click on somebody's channel name, it'll give you an option of things on there. The biggest thing that I feel is the best option is it allows you to go to that person's channel.
Yeah.
And especially because I'm a big proponent of trying to create more of a community and finding other channels. One of the things that I do is I do a live stream where I promote smaller channels just to kind of bring awareness to them. I found this to be the best source of doing that because it allows you, if you see somebody in the chat and you go, oh, let me go see if they have a channel, this is the easiest and the quickest way to do it. That's why you guys have wrenches. I don't expect you guys to do any work whatsoever, though. Just wanted to clear that up. And then June was asking, I think she's asking particularly about your tank, but I wanted to add to that question. Is there a tank size where I guess that you can't run CO2, or is there a size where CO2, this is the size and above that you have to run CO2 would be the better question?
Let's see. My biggest tank that I run CO2 in is my 90 gallon. That's the one behind me. The smallest one is a 2.5 gallon bowl.
Oh, okay.
So now the thing about the bowl is that I don't have fish in there. There's just like some snails. I can't tell you definitive. Like, I don't even measure because I don't care about the animals in that one. That one's just a boost hoarding bowl. So I can't tell you that there's not like a lethal level of CO2 in there. The smaller the tank is, the easier it is to overdose.
Okay.
And that's the kind of tank where you are going to be looking at your bubble count, because like probably in a bowl that small, it's maybe one bubble every 2 seconds, but I don't really pay attention. So it could be a bubble a second, 2 bubbles a second. It's a lot. It's a lot of CO2 in there just to grow out the boost.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 90, if you look at the bubble counter, it's just screaming. Like there's no bubbles. It's just a stream of gas going up.
Now, at that point, is it you can do that because your diffusers are very good, or because that's the other thing that I hear is if you don't have that fine mist coming out of the CO2, that you're just kind of throwing it away because it's not in enough contact with the water to be able to dissolve in it.
That's right. Yeah, even better than the fine mist in the tank though is a reactor, and essentially the way most CO2 reactors work is you have to have a canister filter, or you have to have some kind of pump that is pushing water through. So you have like a something to put in line, and it's just a giant ass pipe that's really thick and long that holds a lot of water. And then you have your CO2 canister pushing CO2 through it. And there's just a crap ton of water pushing through it. So your CO2 is not exposed to air at that point. It's just a bunch of water. So it gives it extra time to mix in with the water and fully dissolve before it comes out into your tank. That's the most efficient way to dissolve it. And I would recommend that for any tank, really any tank that's like 40 gallons and above. You can certainly do it in smaller tanks, and people do. But I think you're wasting a lot more CO2 if you don't use that method. But there's also the inline diffuser, which does introduce the bubbles in the tank in a really efficient way. And you can put those on the canister filter where it pushes the CO2 through a ceramic tube, or I don't know what you would really call it, but it's just a bunch of fine bubbles. And those are really effective. And Kelly likes those. She likes to see the bubbles. And then like the traditional cheap starter way, which I still think is perfectly valid, and in fact I have that going in the plant farm, it's just the ceramic disc. And you can get one that's like 2 inches around for a larger tank. And it you just have to pay attention because it grows algae, it clogs the pores, and you want to make sure it's clean, because when the pores get clogged or there's not a perfect seal on it, you start to get the bigger bubbles, and then you're wasting your CO2 again.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because the one that I know, I think Sarah sells a kit where you use the cartridges, the CO2 cartridges. And I'm looking at those things and I'm going, how long is that going to last? I mean, how long typically does the
Blue Bull's got one of those too, like the little I don't know if they're not paintball cans, they're smaller. Like
what the original paintball cans used to, the ones where you would put in there, or your BB guns, or the whipped cream canisters, that those little things. And I'm going, how much can you really get out of it? I mean, it just seems like it's a scam.
Go by mass. For example, I think one of the larger, like the yeast or the baking soda and acid mixes, those reactions, like a perfect reaction on a larger one might get you a pound of CO2. Now compare that to kind of the standard starting CO2 cylinder. It's 5 pounds, maybe a little bit less for safety, like 4 pounds. And a 4 pound or 5 pound cylinder on my 40 gallon tank, when I have it like at optimal CO2, that's about 3 months, and then I have to go refill it. So imagine trying to do like a 1 pound, or most of them like a 1/4 pound of CO2 on that tank, like, or even a smaller tank. It's just long term. I just don't. I certainly wouldn't be able to do it. I don't see long term success with that. But yeah, those kits, I've never used those kits. I haven't heard great things about them. And the other thing is, like, the smaller the canister of CO2 is, the faster your pressure drops into it. And so like your CO2 injection does slow down over time as that reaction depletes, or like the canister itself starts to get lower. And so you get inconsistent CO2, and then the plants have to adapt. And so you're not getting the best results either with that.
Yeah, because I've even seen one where it's like a Alka-Seltzer tablet that you put in there, and
I had that. That's the passive diffusion one. Yeah, I did that. I didn't. It was a waste. It was a waste of time, waste of money.
Those are just money grabs, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are scenarios where it works fine. You put it in a tiny tank that has zero buffer, and so all of that dissolved CO2 gets dissolved all that CO2 gets dissolved into the tank, and it's all bioavailable because there's no buffer in the way. Then yeah, I can see that being a small boost, because like any extra CO2 would help. It just consistency is better, in my opinion. It's not a lot that gets dissolved, but it's just some. It's just a little bit more.
Yeah, the other thing that I wanted to ask, and I know you and I have kind of gone back and forth on this on comments and stuff like that, but the importance of water flow for plants, is that something that is quintessential for good plant growth? Or because I see, for example, Lucas spreads, I've done it in some of my tanks, but I wouldn't say that mine are like a good example of a planted tank. But in some of my aquariums, I don't have any water flow. But I know that's something that you and Kelly, I've heard you mention that water flow is very important. Why is it that it's important for plants to have water flow?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that lack of water flow means you're going to fail. It's just like our stream is talking about optimizing your garden.
Okay.
Even some of the stuff that we talk about doing, we don't always do it. Like fertilizing at the same time every day consistently, and spreading out your fertilizer like 7 days a week, and having every inch of the tank have adequate flow. I mean, those are all like the ideal things that you want. And the reason that you want good flow is, for one thing, to distribute the CO2 well, distribute the dissolved nutrients well, because if you have like dead pockets in there, you can have a complete lack of anything in that zone, including oxygen. So I mean, that in itself is one reason you want to have flow. And the other thing is, I was talking earlier about the boundary layer on a leaf. That is where all the nutrients, all of the ions will get into that small thin layer of water that surrounds the leaf, and that's where they diffuse into the leaf. And the thicker that boundary layer is, the harder it is for those nutrients to access the leaf. And you can thin out that layer by having water constantly moving across it. So that's just, it's a benefit, not a requirement, especially if you have easy weeds. Like, I mean, I think LRB, he grows a lot of crypts, he grows a lot of guppy grass and stuff like that. I mean, you don't have to baby those. Those will grow in spite of you, not because of you.
The other thing I was curious, because I hear this also, and I don't know if I'm misunderstanding it, or again, it could just be the way it's presented is probably not as accurate. But when you add CO2 to your aquarium, are you really speeding up the growth of the plants? Is that something that is actual, or is it just because is CO2 just kind of helping them grow better? Is Is that something that really does occur, that plants will grow much quicker with CO2?
Yeah, for sure. You can, and also you can increase if you want to increase your light and make them grow even faster. You can even, because CO2 makes photosynthesis more efficient, you can actually, if you inject CO2, you can kind of bump your light down a little bit, and you can still get slow growth. It's going to be faster than if you didn't inject CO2, but it's not going to be like, it doesn't have to go crazy with the growth. Okay. But I mean, the plants have access to more food. They're going to grow faster under any lighting condition. You can just dictate how much faster it's going to be. All those, I mean, and also you can't, and I want to clarify, like, you can't just lower your light for any plant. Every plant is different. Every plant has a different light compensation point. Some plants require a crap ton of light or they're just going to die. Like, there's some plants where if you go away for a weekend, you let something grow a little bit too tall and shade out the other bitchy plant, it's gone.
Yeah, and I think that's where you have to have an understanding when you start planning your aquariums as to where you're going to place them in the aquarium to prevent that. And I don't know if there's enough information about that out there. I know it's stuff that over the course of being in the hobby, I've kind of picked up a little bit of here and there, but it'd be nice to, is there any resources out there, I guess, that where if somebody's seeking that information, that it's available to them, I might not be aware of?
I would say the absolute best all-in-one resource for for growing plants optimally is the 2 Hour Aquarist, that website.
Okay.
They sell products, they sell fertilizer, and they frequently recommend their fertilizers, but you don't have to buy those. I think the naming convention on them is really stupid, but the information on that site, probably the number one source that got me moving beyond just keeping tanks with plants in them, like that advanced level. There's a lot of great articles on there that explain a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing that I also kind of wanted to know about, and I know I've been guilty of saying this, that that you don't necessarily have to fertilize your plants, because if you have fish in your aquariums, the waste from the fish is going to help supplement the nutrients in for the plants. Now, is that actually an accurate statement, or is it something I'm just talking out of the side of my head?
Yeah, I mean that's like the principle of a lot of aquaponics is just putting like tilapia and shit in the water so that you don't have to worry about nutrients as much. Just feed the fish for sure, especially in low tech. In high tech, you want to have better control of your nutrients, because you want to have a good balance of them, and you want to make sure, because they need every single one of them, and the limitation of growth is always going to be your scarcest resource. And so it's not a big deal in low tech, because like there's not nutrients don't matter as much. Like you need all of them, but there's such a tiny amount that they need that you're usually pretty well covered. Like the library mosh pit, I don't fertilize that, or I didn't until I started growing Emersed plants in it. I just, fish poop.
Yeah.
All I
now
needed.
is now that you touched on that, is that something that that you think it's going to become a bigger part of our hobby? Where I know I'm doing it a lot more, is putting immersed plants, growing just where the roots are in the water and growing out of the aquarium. I like the look. That's really why I do it predominantly, is because I like looking at plants. I live in an arid area, so plants to me are very interesting, because I don't see them out in nature other than cactuses and carrizo bushes. But so for me, seeing green areas is something I'm not accustomed to, so I enjoy it. I really like it. I don't know if it's just a figment of my imagination, but I see that there's more of a trend going in that direction. I'm finding more of what used to be like plant channels on YouTube are starting to dip their toes into the aquarium side, and they're kind of bringing their plant knowledge along with them. And there's a young lady that I just recently found, and she's got a big planet channel for houseplants, but she's just starting to share her aquarium hobby. And I know that she talks a lot about that type of putting plants on the top of aquariums and stuff like that. Is that something that you are also doing now, or I know you kind of mentioned that I think that's the direction you want to go in now, is talking more about that stuff?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like educating people about it, not really, because I'm still learning. Like I have the basic stuff, everyone, if you don't, you should have some pothos growing out of your tanks. Like that's kind of the number one. And then like Monstera, I've got some philodendrons. What else? Aglaonema, I think that's how you say it. Just like the I forgot what the common name for it is. Yeah, just basic stuff. And yeah, just because I like the look of them. And then in fact, like I used to have 2 LEDs on the mosh pit, and I essentially took all the plants from the back half of the mosh pit and took that light off, and then put like a big netted bed of aqua soil laying across the top so I can grow all that stuff out. And so there's nothing planted in the back half of the mosh pit, but now there's a crap ton of roots trailing down into it. And I find that I have to start fertilizing, because all those immersed plants have all the access to CO2, and so they're sapping nutrients from the water faster than the aquatic plants would.
Yeah, and well, I don't think I have that issue just yet, because I do tend to have a lot of fish in my aquarium, and I don't think I'm running into that. I did notice though that I don't get as much algae as I used to. That's been interesting. It's it's kind of depleting a little bit of the free nutrients for the algae. Not I still get some, but not nearly as much as I used to.
Yeah, I can see that. And if you are, I don't know if you change your lighting level at all, or like things start to get shaded in the tank, you don't run into as many algae issues. So I think that's, I mean, in terms of algae, I do think the number one issue is for low tech with algae issues is that your light's too high and you're putting too much demand on the plants. You're making them hungrier than you're able to feed them, and so they start cannibalizing themselves and they become unhealthy, and algae loves unhealthy plants.
Yeah, that would probably make sense why I was struggling so much with at first with the nubiuses, but once the plants started getting overgrown and the top light started getting covered up,
Yeah, Anubias is a big one. Like that is an algae magnet. If it gets too much light, it's happy either in a very humid environment above the water so it can get access to CO2, or in like almost hibernation mode, tucked under in some shade, and it still grows, but if you compare it to how it would grow immersed, it's extra slow. You was asking me, are you trying to grow some vegetables or herbs as well? Not yet, but I mean, it's not out of the question. Vegetables, maybe not as much, because like they require a lot of light usually.
Like aquaponics, is that what he's asking?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen. I've been curious. Do the typical potato or yam, that they put up there. And
I mean, you can just put a sweet potato in there and grow the vines, and that'll sap a crap ton of nutrients out of the water.
Yeah,
those grow like crazy.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're pretty much talked about what we wanted to talk about. I want to quickly just say thank you for accepting the invitation and coming on, and giving me your time. Give me the time for you to be here. Anytime soon, are we ever going to see another music video coming out?
Man, AI is doing the job for us, though. I've been having fun writing my own lyrics and just and then having someone else perform it, having AI perform it. It's just it's quick and it's entertaining to me. That AI bubble will burst eventually, I think, though.
I hear some of the AI stuff, but it's still, I don't know what it is. I don't know, is that uncanny valley, but it's missing something. It just doesn't. I don't really care for it.
I've heard it's missing authenticity. I mean, and it's something that I don't think can be replicated. I think humans just have a sense for it.
Yeah, it's just, and I've heard a lot of stuff in it. I still haven't heard anything where I can go, wow, that's a great song. Whether it's the music arrangement or the lyrics or any of that stuff, without having human input, like what you were saying, just writing the lyrics and then have it AI do the other stuff. I haven't been where it's 100% AI. I still haven't come across anything that just kind of hits right.
It's getting better, and the thing is, like, every single day, AI is the worst it will ever be. Like, it's just only going to get better.
True. Well, with that being said, I want to say thank you for everybody that joined us. You really brought out the people today. It's probably
how many people were here?
At one point, I think I had like 58 or something like that.
Nice.
So
thanks for showing up, y'all.
Thank you for showing up and supporting me and Stephen. And then we'll be seeing each other in some of the chats. So you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you guys soon. You guys take care.
Bye.
Adios.